My husband told his mistress I would never recover. She was the psychiatrist who signed the commitment papers. He boasted about the $200 million tech empire he built from nothing, but he forgot one crucial detail from the founding documents, my signature. The company he bragged about, it was legally and entirely mine. My name is Eliza Vance. The first sound was the grate of a key in a heavy lock. I woke up wrong. Not in my bed, not with the familiar gray light of the Boston harbor spilling into our penthouse. I was on a mattress too thin, under a blanket too stiff. The room was a sterile, unforgiving white. The smell hit me second, a sharp, chemical sting of disinfectant that scraped the back of my throat. I knew this place, or at least, I knew of it. The Westwood Premium Care Sanatorium. It was where Boston's elite sent their inconvenient problems. A place where privacy was a polite word for absolute isolation. A flash of last night fractured my memory. The argument. It had been brutal, louder than we'd ever been. I had found the transfers, the hidden accounts, Julian's face, tight with a rage I had never seen, and his brother, Marcus, standing behind him, blocking the door. "You're just tired, Eliza," Julian had insisted, his voice a venomous calm. "You've been working too hard. You're not making sense." Then, the door to this white room opened, and Dr. Seraphina Croft walked in, wearing a crisp lab coat and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. She was Julian's mistress. I knew it, but I had never been able to prove it. Now, here she was, in charge. "Eliza," she said, her voice dripping with professional condescension. "I'm glad you're awake. You had a significant psychotic break last night. You don't remember agreeing to a voluntary admission for observation." "A lie," I screamed. The word tore from my throat. "That's a lie. Julian." I lunged for the door, for the hallway I could see just past her shoulder. My escape lasted less than a second. Two orderlies, large and expressionless, materialized beside her. They grabbed my arms in a practiced, efficient hold that was terrifying in its lack of malice. I was just a task to be completed. Julian appeared in the doorway then, standing just far enough back not to be involved. His face was a mask of artificial concern, that look of pained pity he had perfected. "This is for the best, Ellie," he said, and the pet name felt like a slap. "I'll manage everything while you get the rest you need." Everything. His gaze was cold. Everything included Apex Innovative Solutions, the company I had poured my inheritance and my life into, the company I foolishly believed we had built together. "No," I shrieked, kicking, fighting the hands that now held my arm steady. "You can't do this." Seraphina nodded to one of the orderlies. I saw the glint of the needle, felt the sharp sting in my bicep. A heavy chemical fog began to pour into my mind. I fought it, trying to hold on to the edges of my anger, but it was like trying to hold water. As my legs buckled and the orderlies began to lift me back to the bed, I heard Julian's voice from the hall, quieter now, talking on his phone. He must have been speaking to her, to Seraphina, who was still in the room, watching me go under. "She'll never recover," he said, his voice a low, confident murmur. "The company is mine now." They left. The lock clicked shut. As the sedative dragged me down, one clear, cold thought cut through the haze. I never signed anything. I would never have voluntarily agreed to this. The signature on those papers was a forgery. Seraphina Croft had not diagnosed me. She had used her medical authority as a weapon, turning my husband's gaslighting into a legal document. They had taken my phone, my laptop, my rings, my shoes. Every link to the outside world was gone. This wasn't protection. It was a prison. I lay in the sterile silence, the drug pulling me into an unconsciousness I didn't want. My hand, limp, brushed against the cheap cotton of the hospital robe they had put on me. My fingers fumbled with the pocket and found something sharp, something they had missed, a metal hairpin. It was simple, strong, the kind my father used to buy me. It was not a weapon, not by their standards, but it was all I had left. The days bled together in a gray watercolor of medication and exhaustion. They brought me pills in small paper cups 3 times a day, and 3 times a day I became an actress. I learned to tuck the chalky, bitter discs between my gum and my cheek, to smile vaguely at the nurse, and to pretend to swallow. The moment the heavy door clicked shut, I spat the dissolved paste into the toilet and flushed. I needed my mind back. I needed to be sharp. With clarity came observation. I studied the rotations, the security checkpoints, the way the orderlies held their keys. I studied the staff. Most were indifferent, hardened by the sanitized misery of the place. But there was one, a young nurse named Ben, who looked too new for this. I saw him flinch when Dr. Croft spoke to me during her rounds, her voice a scalpel of false sympathy. He would not meet my eyes, not out of cruelty, but, I suspected, out of shame. He was my chance. My opportunity came during mandatory group therapy, a humiliating circle of vacant-eyed patients in a room smelling of stale coffee. I waited until Ben was the nurse assigned to the session. Halfway through, I let my head drop. I moaned, a soft sound, and slumped sideways off the plastic chair, letting my limbs go slack. It was not hard to fake. My body was already weak and trembling. "It's the medication," I whispered, clutching my head as Ben rushed over, his eyes wide with concern. "Dizzy. I feel so dizzy." "Okay, Eliza, let's get you out of the group," he said, his voice gentle. He helped me up, his arm under mine. Instead of taking me back to my room, he guided me to the nurse's station, just as I had hoped. "Sit here. I'll get you some water. You're probably dehydrated." He parked me on a stool just outside the main desk and disappeared down the hall toward the break room. I had seconds. The other nurses were focused on their screens. My eyes darted to the bank of personal lockers against the wall. They were cheap, standard-issue metal. My fingers, trembling, closed around the steel hairpin I had kept hidden in the waistband of my scrubs. I slid off the stool, using the high desk as cover, and moved to the nearest locker. The lock was simple. I jammed the pin inside, raking it in a desperate, clumsy motion, praying it would work. I had maybe 30 seconds. The pin snagged. I twisted. The small metal tab clicked open. I pulled the door open just an inch. Inside a jacket, a tabloid magazine, and a cheap, plastic-wrapped burner phone. An orderly's secret. I grabbed the phone, shoved it deep into the pocket of my robe, and pushed the locker shut just as I heard Ben's footsteps returning. I was back on the stool, head in my hands, when he offered me the paper cup of water. That night, I waited until the 2 a.m. bed check. The silence of the ward was absolute, broken only by the hum of the electronic locks. I slipped into the cold, tiled bathroom, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I powered it on. The low battery icon blinked angrily at me. 1 bar. I had 1 call. I could not call the police. Julian would claim I was hysterical. I could not call a friend. He would intercept them. I could only call the one person Julian had never managed to charm. The one person who had warned me against him from the very beginning. My fingers dialed the New York number I knew by heart, the number I had not called in years. It rang once, twice. Devereaux. Her voice was high-powered, awake, and annoyed, even in the middle of the night. "Madeline," I gasped, the words coming out in a desperate whisper. "It's me. It's Eliza. Westwood. Julian locked me up. He's working with a doctor. Serafina Croft. He—" The screen went black. The battery was dead. The call had lasted 15 seconds. "No," I whispered at the dead plastic. "No, please." 2 days passed. It was 48 hours of pure hell. Every time the lock on my door clicked, I expected Julian or Serafina, armed with new papers, new drugs. The failed call had only made it worse. I had tipped my hand. And now they would know. Hope dissolved, leaving a residue of pure despair. I had failed. On the third morning, I was staring at the white wall when I heard a commotion in the hall, not the usual placid, drugged movements, but loud, angry, authoritative voices. My door flew open. It was not a nurse. It was Madeline Devereaux. She was in her late 60s, dressed in a navy blue suit of armor that probably cost more than my first car, flanked by two stone-faced men in suits who were clearly private investigators. Dr. Croft and the hospital administrator were scrambling behind her, their faces pale. "Ma'am, this is a private facility," the administrator began. Madeline did not even turn. She marched straight to me. "Eliza, get your coat." "You cannot just—" Serafina tried, her professional mask cracking. Madeline finally turned, and her eyes were arctic. "The document you used to admit my client was based on a fraudulent remote diagnosis and a forged signature, which constitutes felony kidnapping in this state. You," she pointed a long, manicured finger at Serafina, "just destroyed your medical career. And you," she motioned to the administrator, "are about to lose this hospital in the resulting lawsuit." She turned to her team. "Get her out. Secure her belongings." They handed me my street clothes. I walked out of that white room, past a stunned Serafina Croft, and into the sunlight. I was thin. My skin was gray, and my hands were shaking. But as I met Madeline's gaze, she saw it. My eyes were no longer soft. They were made of steel. We did not go back to the penthouse. Julian was there, and that apartment was no longer my home. It was the scene of the betrayal. Instead, Madeline's driver took us to a gleaming, anonymous glass tower overlooking the harbor, not far from the life I had lost, but sealed from it. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling apartment, and one of Madeline's stone-faced private security guards posted himself by the door. It was a safe house, protected 24/7. I was still shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor from the aftermath of the sedatives. They gave me tea, and I sat on a sofa that cost more than most people's cars, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, and I told her everything. I told her about the last few years, the slow, insidious creep of Julian's control, how he had convinced me to step back from Apex's finances. "You're the visionary, Ellie. Don't bog yourself down with spreadsheets," he'd said. I told her how he slowly isolated me from my friends, painting them as jealous. I told her about finding the offshore accounts, the transfers to Serafina Croft, the plans for a life without me. The words poured out of me, a toxic flood of humiliation and rage. Madeline listened. She did not interrupt, did not offer sympathy. She just watched me, her gaze analytical, as if I were a witness she was preparing for the stand. When I finally fell silent, exhausted and hollow, she nodded once. She reached into her briefcase and retrieved a thick, leather-bound portfolio, placing it on the coffee table between us with a heavy, definitive sound. "Your father," she said, her voice quiet but cutting. "The late Senator Vance was a lion. He was brilliant, he was ruthless, and he protected what was his. And he never, not for 1 second, trusted Julian Thorne." I looked at the portfolio, confused. "Madeline, what is this?" "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is the lion's will. Not the public document, but the private one. This is the cage your father built." She opened it. "You told Julian that your father left you $50 million. When you decided to fund Apex Innovative Solutions, you told Julian it was your inheritance, a gift to him, to his vision." "It was," I whispered. "That was the startup capital." "No," Madeline said. "That is what Julian believes. Your father would never hand over that kind of power to a man like Julian without leverage. He knew Julian saw you as a prize, not a partner. So, I structured it." She turned a page, revealing a complex diagram of holding companies. "That $50 million was not a gift. Eliza, it was not a loan. It was a strategic, legally obfuscated equity purchase. You do not own 50% of Apex, splitting it with your husband. My heart started to pound, a slow, heavy beat. You own 51%, Madeline stated, her eyes locking onto mine. You have the controlling interest. I could not breathe. But the papers. Julian always said we were equal partners. Julian is a fool who only reads the cover page. The shares are held by a parent entity, Vance Holdings, which was established by your father's estate. It is the majority shareholder of Apex. And I, she added, was named as the sole trustee of Vance Holdings, with the explicit directive to take action in the event of your absence, your death. Or, she paused, letting the word hang in the air. You're being declared legally incapacitated. The blood drained from my face. He wasn't just trying to get rid of me. He was trying to trigger the clause. He was trying to take control of Vance Holdings by proving you were mentally unfit, Madeline confirmed, her voice devoid of emotion. Instead, he just proved he was a criminal. So, Julian? Julian, Madeline said, closing the portfolio, is the self-aggrandizing CEO and founder of a company he does not control. He is, legally speaking, a minority shareholder with 49%, and more importantly, he is an employee. An employee. Eliza, who can be terminated. She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the lights of the city. He brags about the company he built, she said, her reflection a sharp silhouette against the skyline. But legally, it is yours, and he just made the fatal mistake of illegally imprisoning his own chairman of the board. The Phoenix Protocol, Madeline called it. It began the moment I was secure in the safe house. My old life, my old identity, was incinerated. My personal phone was destroyed, my old email accounts were locked. Madeline replaced them with encrypted hardware that she, and only she, controlled. The apartment ceased to be a refuge and became a war room. Madeline did not just bring lawyers, she brought a team. She brought a forensic accountant who moved with the silent, predatory grace of a shark. She brought a stylist named Kira, whose eyes were as sharp and critical as the scissors she used. And she brought a man named Reyes, a terrifying former federal prosecutor whose entire job, for 2 days, was to train me. He taught me how to withstand a cross-examination, how to use silence as a weapon, and how to deliver a killing blow on the witness stand. The transformation was absolute. Kira looked at the photos of me from the last 5 years, at the soft, floral dresses and comfortable loungewear Julian preferred, and declared them victim's clothing. My long, gentle brown hair, which Julian had always told me he loved, was the first casualty. Kira cut it short, into an angular, aggressive bob that grazed my jaw, and dyed it a brilliant, icy platinum. The wife was replaced by a warrior. The cashmere was replaced by custom-tailored power suits in shades of charcoal, navy, and black. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see the woman who had been dragged to Westwood. I saw the daughter of Senator Vance. While Madeline's legal team prepared the two-front war, a massive, multi-million-dollar civil suit against Serafina Croft and the Westwood Sanatorium for false imprisonment and medical malpractice, and a formal criminal complaint to the Massachusetts Medical Board designed to permanently revoke Serafina's license, I worked. I did not sleep. I consumed Apex. As the 51% owner, I had a master key to every server, every email, every financial record. For nights on end, fueled by black coffee and a cold, purifying rage, I dove into the company's digital guts. Julian was arrogant. He was sloppy. The embezzlement was shockingly easy to find. He had been using the company as his personal piggy bank for years. I found the trips, the ones I had been told were investor meetings. A 10-day trip to St. Bart's with Serafina, expensed to the company as vital market research, the lease on his new sports car, hidden under client transport, hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned away. I also learned about Project Titan. This was Julian's masterpiece, the project he was using to court new investors. the key to a massive initial public offering. It was a revolutionary AI engine he claimed to have developed himself. He was the face of it, the innovator, the genius. I kept digging. The embezzlement was infuriating, but it was small. It was rats stealing cheese. I was looking for the real betrayal. I found it in a hidden, encrypted partition on the executive server. I only found it because I had access as the system owner, a level of clearance Julian never dreamed I would use. He was not just stealing from the company. He was preparing to murder it. Julian was in the final stages of a secret negotiation, not to take the company public, but to sell its core asset. He was selling Project Titan, exclusively and perpetually, to our largest competitor, Cygnus Dynamics. The plan was chilling in its simplicity. He would sell the AI the entire future of Apex for a private payment of hundreds of millions, funneled to an offshore shell corporation. Then, with the company's core technology gone, he would drive Apex into bankruptcy, wiping out all other shareholders, including me. He would take the money, take his mistress, and disappear, leaving behind a corporate skeleton. I leaned back from the glowing screen. The old Eliza would have been destroyed. The old Eliza would have wept. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, the sharp angles, the platinum hair, the cold eyes. "He wants to sell my company," I whispered. The whisper was colder than the air in the room. "Fine. We will have a board meeting, but it will be my meeting." I picked up the secure phone Madeline had given me. I scrolled through the executive directory. I knew exactly who to call. Anya Sharma, the vice president of engineering. The woman I knew, from my own time at the company, was the true genius behind Titan. The woman Julian had belittled, taken credit from, and repeatedly passed over for promotion. I pressed the call button. Anya Sharma agreed to meet at a nondescript coffee shop in Cambridge, far from the downtown financial district. She arrived looking exhausted, her brilliance dimmed by the stress of working for a tyrant. I was already in a back booth, and when she saw me, her eyes went wide. She had only ever known me as Eliza, Julian's quiet, supportive wife. She was not prepared for the woman with platinum hair and a steel gaze who was waiting for her. "Eliza, what on earth happened to you? Julian said you were—" "In a sanatorium." I finished for her. He put me there. Now I am out, and I am cleaning house. I did not waste time. I laid out what I knew the plan to sell Project Titan, the secret negotiations with Cygnus Dynamics, the embezzlement. Anya's face hardened, the exhaustion replaced by a familiar, simmering anger. "I knew it," she whispered. "He's been pulling core code components onto encrypted drives for weeks. He told me it was for an off-site backup, but he wouldn't let me see the manifests." She looked at me, her gaze sharp. "He's gutting the company. Titan is my work. He promised me the chief technology officer position 3 years ago if I delivered it. Instead, he gave the title to his brother's useless friend and kept me as a VP. Just one more project away from the promotion." "He never intended to promote you, Anya," I said. "He intended to rob you, just like he robbed me." "What do you need?" she asked, her voice low. "I need you to be my eyes and ears. I need to know every move he makes, and I need to know if you've already taken precautions." A small, dangerous smile touched her lips. "I've been documenting his incompetence for a year, but I did more than that. I installed a keylogger on Marcus's computer 6 weeks ago, after I caught him trying to access my development servers." My own smile met hers. The trap was already set. "Good," I said. "Now, go back to the office and watch." The first move was not mine. It was Madeline's. The next morning, as Julian and Marcus were walking into the Apex offices, they were met by a team of forensic accountants sent by the majority shareholder. Madeline, acting officially on behalf of Vance Holdings, had sent a letter invoking her rights as the controlling stakeholder to demand an immediate, unrestricted, full-scale audit of all company finances. Anya's report came an hour later. "Panic," the text message read. "Total, 4-alarm panic. They're locked in Marcus's office. Julian is screaming. They were terrified. They had been operating under the assumption that their silent partner, the Vance estate, was a dormant pile of money. They assumed I was drugged and legally invisible. They were not prepared for the lion to rear its head. Anya's keylogger feed became a geyser of criminality. We watched in real time as Marcus and Julian began their frantic cover-up. They created fake invoices from shell corporations to account for the missing money. They drafted backdated contracts for consulting services that never happened. We saw the emails between them, discussing which junior-level employee in accounting had made the clerical errors that they could use as a scapegoat. "He's preparing a wire transfer," I told Madeline, watching the data stream from the safe house. "A big one. Looks like almost $3 million. To a new shell in the Caymans. He's trying to hide the last of the liquid cash before the auditors freeze the accounts." Madeline analyzed. "It's the final act of a desperate thief. Do we stop him?" I could hear the cold satisfaction in Madeline's voice over the phone. "No, we let him do it. An attempted cover-up is one thing. Active wire fraud, committed during an audit, is a federal crime that the FBI cannot ignore. Let him sign his own confession." We waited. I watched my screen as Marcus Thorne, the arrogant, incompetent chief financial officer of my company, bypassed his own security protocols and authorized the transfer. I watched the keylogger capture the final authorization code. The transfer cleared. "He's done," I said. "And so is he," replied Madeline. "The messenger is on his way." Madeline's messenger was not delivering a subpoena. He was delivering a complete, documented case file including the keylogs, the bank records, the secret emails, and the freshly completed illegal wire transfer directly to the head of the white-collar crime division at the Boston FBI office. At 4:30 p.m., as Anya texted me, "It's happening." 2 agents in dark suits walked onto the floor at Apex, went straight to Marcus Thorne's glass-walled office, and, without a word, put him in handcuffs. They walked him out in front of the entire company, a man utterly defeated, his face the color of ash. The first pawn was off the board. The news of Marcus's arrest exploded like a grenade in the Apex offices. The Boston business journals had the story within an hour. Apex Innovative CFO arrested in fraud probe. The phones lit up. Minority investors, partners, and vendors. Everyone Julian had charmed and lied to was calling, demanding answers. He had lost his primary co-conspirator and his financial cleaner in one move. According to Anya, Julian was unhinged. He was stalking the office, his face a mask of sweat and fury. He burst into meetings, screaming at random employees, accusing them of being the leak, of being spies. "The atmosphere in here," Anya texted me, "is like a tank of gasoline waiting for a match." He was beginning to understand that this was not a random audit. He was beginning to understand that someone was hunting him. But he still thought I was the problem he had to manage, not the hand guiding the knife. He did the only thing a desperate man could do. He called his other accomplice. He called Serafina Croft, demanding she help him. He was desperate for more ammunition, for fabricated medical records, for anything he could use in court to prove I was unstable and gain control of the Vance Holdings assets. But Serafina was in a hell of her own making. Madeline's lawsuit had landed with surgical precision. The state medical board had been notified. Westwood, terrified of the legal exposure, had suspended her privileges immediately. She was facing a career-ending investigation and the potential loss of her license to practice medicine. Forever. Julian, in his arrogance, saw Serafina as a love-struck fool who would follow him to the ends of the earth. He was wrong. Serafina was a ruthless opportunist. She had attached herself to Julian because she saw a path to wealth and power. Now, she saw him for what he was, a sinking ship, and she had no intention of drowning with him. He called her, begging her to meet him at a high-end restaurant on the waterfront, a place where they used to conduct their affair. He told her he needed her to sign one more affidavit, one more medical opinion to counter the audit. He was desperate. He promised her $10 million, a fraction of the Titan sale, as soon as the deal was done. Serafina agreed to meet him at 8 p.m. I was there at 7:30. I sat in a secluded booth, wearing a black dress and the icy platinum hair he had not yet seen. I watched Serafina walk in. She looked older, lines of stress etched around her mouth. Her professional confidence shattered. She saw me, her eyes filled with hate, but also with a cold understanding. We were not friends. We were not allies. We were two women who had been betrayed by the same man, and one of us was offering the other a lifeboat. She sat down opposite me without a word. "He promised you 10 million, I believe," I said, my voice quiet. "He promised me a life," she spat. "He's a liar." "Yes, he is." "And right now, you are his co-conspirator in felony wire fraud, medical malpractice, and false imprisonment. You are going to lose everything." "What do you want?" she asked. "He's coming here, to this table. You will sit here, with me, and you will tell him the truth. And in exchange, Madeline will amend the civil suit," I said. "We will still pursue damages from Westwood, but we will focus on them, not on you. We will inform the medical board that you are cooperating fully as a witness in a federal criminal investigation. You might lose your job at Westwood, but you will probably keep your license. It's more than you deserve, and it's the only offer you're going to get." She stared at me for a long time. She was calculating. She was a survivor. "I'll need my lawyer to approve it," she finally said. "He already has," I replied. "Madeline spoke to him this afternoon." At 8 o'clock on the dot, Julian Thorne walked in. He looked terrible, his suit rumpled, his face puffy. He strode toward the booth, a desperate, fake smile plastered on his face. He saw Serafina, and his smile widened. Then he saw me. The smile did not just fade, it collapsed. The blood drained from his face, leaving a sickly, pale gray mask. He stopped, frozen, 5 feet from the table. "Julian," Serafina said, her voice as cold and clear as ice. "You're late." He could not speak. He just stared at me, his mind racing, trying to comprehend the impossibility of me sitting there, composed and in control, across from his mistress. "What is this?" he finally managed, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Serafina, what is she doing here?" Serafina leaned forward. "Julian," she said, savoring the moment of his terror, "I think you should speak to my lawyer. I've agreed to testify against you. Every call, every meeting, every plan to sell Titan. I'm trading it all for immunity." Julian's face cycled through a spectrum of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and finally, a deep, reptilian rage. He took a step toward the table, his hand half raised as if to strike Serafina. "You," he hissed, his voice trembling. "You worthless. You dare betray me." I almost laughed. The sound that escaped me was cold and sharp. "Betray you?" I asked, leaning forward. "The way you betrayed me when you had your mistress sign me into a psychiatric ward, or the way you betrayed your own brother, Julian, the man who is currently sitting in a federal holding cell because he was cleaning up your financial mess." Julian recoiled as if I had struck him. He had no idea Marcus was the price we paid to get the FBI's attention. The flashback of our meeting with Serafina was vivid. It had been just last week, in a sterile lawyer's conference room. She had been defiant for the first 10 minutes, until Madeline laid out the criminal charges she was facing. Charges that carried a minimum sentence of 5 years, completely separate from losing her license. "Julian will protect me," she had said, her voice wavering. "Julian is protecting himself," Madeline had countered. "And he is failing. He is a narcissist who is now in a cage, and he will sacrifice anyone to get out, including you. He will tell the board you acted alone, that you were an obsessed lover, that you forged the documents without his knowledge to get rid of the competition. He will paint you as insane, and it will work." I had spoken then, for the first time. He never intended to leave me for you, Serafina. He told you that, didn't he? He was never going to make you his wife. You were just a tool. He used your medical license to get rid of me, and he used your ego to make you believe you were special. Her face had crumpled. The professional mask, the clinical superiority, it all dissolved, revealing a woman who was just as humiliated as I was, but in a different way. She was bitterer because she had been fooled not just emotionally, but professionally. "What do you want?" she had whispered. "Everything," I replied. "Every email, every text, every conversation. Help me destroy him, and I will help you save yourself." She had agreed, and she had delivered. Now, in the restaurant, Serafina's hand, which had been resting on her lap, moved to her purse. She pulled out a small digital voice recorder and slid it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Julian's water glass. "What is that?" he asked, his eyes darting to the small black device. "That," Serafina said, her voice calm for the first time, "is my insurance policy. I've recorded every single phone call we have had for the last 6 months. Julian, every time you bragged about the audit, every time you told me how you were going to handle Eliza, every detail," she leaned in, "of your plan to sell Project Titan to Cygnus Dynamics." Julian's color, which had been pale, turned a waxy, translucent white. He lunged for the recorder, but I was faster. My hand snapped out and covered it. "Ah, but it's the content of those recordings that's so fascinating," I said, looking at him. "Because we gave them to Anya. And she had a question. She didn't recognize some of the core code language you were describing in your calls. Serafina's recordings held a secret she did not even know she had. They revealed the real, staggering, sickening truth." "Project Titan," I said, my voice dropping. "It wasn't yours, was it? And it wasn't even Anya's, though she built the entire superstructure, the core engine, the revolutionary part, the part you've been claiming as your singular genius." Julian was shaking his head, backing away from the table, muttering, "No, no, no." "Oh, you remember David Liao, don't you?" I asked. "Your old roommate from MIT, the genius who could never get his life together, the one who died of an overdose last year, leaving behind nothing but a few hard drives you helpfully offered to clear out for his grieving parents." The look on his face was my answer. It was all true. "You didn't develop Titan, Julian. You stole it. You stole the intellectual property of a dead man, built my company on it, and lied to me, to your investors, and to your entire team." I stood up then, picking up the recorder and dropping it into my own purse. The fight was gone from his eyes, replaced by the hollow, vacant look of a man who had just seen his entire world disintegrate. "You're not just a fraud," I said, looking down at the empty shell of the man I had married. "You're a grave robber, and now you have nothing left to steal." He was finished. Julian left the restaurant in a blind panic, a cold sweat dampening the collar of his expensive shirt. He was trapped. The FBI was already crawling over Marcus's life, which meant they were only hours away from connecting the fraud directly to him. Serafina, his ace in the hole, had not only flipped but had provided them with a treasure trove of evidence. And the Cygnus Dynamics deal, his golden parachute, was dead. Madeline's office had sent an anonymous tip regarding the intellectual property theft of David Liao's work, and the buyer had vanished. Every path was blocked. His world was collapsing. He had one objective run. He raced back to the penthouse, not as its owner, but as a burglar. His only goal was the safe hidden behind a false panel in his closet. It contained his escape kit, a fake passport, keys to an untraceable storage unit, and $50,000 in cash. He tried his keycard on the private elevator. The light flashed red. Access denied. "Damn her!" he snarled. He ran to the service stairs, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the concrete, and burst onto his floor. He jammed his key into the apartment door. Read, "Access denied, Madeline." As the trustee of Vance Holdings, the legal owner of the penthouse, she had already locked him out of his own life. In a fit of adrenaline-fueled rage, he shouldered the door, but the reinforced lock held. He ran to the end of the hall, smashed the glass on the fire axe case, and used the heavy steel blade to break his way into his own home. He went straight for his credit cards on the nightstand, intending to call an executive car service. He tried one. Card declined. He tried another. Card frozen. He tried his debit card. Account locked. Madeline had not just cut him off. She had exsanguinated him. He roared, a sound of pure, impotent fury, and hurled his phone at the floor-to-ceiling window. It cracked the inner pane, the web of shattered glass reflecting his broken face. He was trapped in a $20 million prison, penniless. He tore the closet apart, ripping his suits from their hangers. He opened the safe, grabbing the cash and the passport. But it was not enough. He needed to hurt me. He needed to burn me down as thoroughly as I was burning him. He began to smash the apartment. He overturned the marble coffee table. He ripped the abstract paintings from the walls. He went into my old office, a room I had not used since he took over the company, and began tearing it apart. He ripped books from shelves, threw my old laptop against a wall. He pulled the desk from its moorings, and his hand brushed a small, recessed panel in the wall, a hidden compartment I had built years ago. He tore it open. Inside sat a single, silver external hard drive. He thought it was old company data, perhaps something he could use. He plugged it into the desktop. It was not Apex. It was Eliza. It was my entire past. The drive contained all my personal video logs from my 20s. It contained my private digital journals, pages and pages of my intimate thoughts, my anxieties about my father's death, my early, naive hopes for my marriage to Julian. He scrolled through them, a sick, victorious smile spreading across his face. He could not win in court, but he could still destroy me. He would leak this. He would leak every private, vulnerable thought I ever had, painting me as the unstable, hysterical woman he had tried to commit. He would ruin my name forever. Then he saw the other folder. It was labeled Estate. He clicked it. His face went white. It was all there. The original bank statements, the scanned, notarized documents from my father's trust, the irrefutable proof of the $50 million equity purchase, the very documents proving I owned the company. He now held, in one hand, the tool of my public humiliation, and in the other, the evidence of his own complete legal defeat. A new, frantic plan formed. He could not let this drive exist, but he could not let the paper copies in my main safe exist either. He had to destroy everything. He needed chaos. He needed a diversion. He grabbed his phone and dialed the only person left who was foolish enough and financially dependent enough to obey him, his sister, Olivia Thorne. "Livy," he said, his voice a frantic rasp. "I need the boat. Our boat. Bring it to the building's private dock. Now, not in 10 minutes. Now." He hung up. He ran to the grand marble-faced fireplace in the living room and twisted the gas key until he heard the steady, heavy hiss. He went to the bar, grabbed a bottle of 100-year-old whiskey, and smashed it over the silk sofa. He ripped the heavy velvet curtains from the rods, pulling them down onto the alcohol-soaked furniture. He would burn the penthouse. He would burn the paper records in the safe. He would burn the evidence, and in the smoke and chaos, he would escape. We were in Madeline's downtown office, just 3 blocks away, signing the final injunctions to be filed in the morning. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was not a call. It was a push notification from an app I had installed years ago, an app Julian had forgotten about, the Penthouse Smart Home System. Alert smoke detected, living room. Alert gas detected, living room. "Madeline," I said, my voice ice. I opened the security app. Julian had not known about the backup cameras I had installed after a housekeeper incident 2 years prior. I had a live feed. I watched, my blood turning to frost, as the man I married, his face a grotesque mask of rage, poured the contents of a jerry-can gasoline over my father's portrait. "He's burning it," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "He's burning the penthouse." Then I remembered. The hard drive was one thing, but the safe, my God, the safe in my office. "The original documents," I said, my voice rising in panic. "The original trust agreements, the stock certificates from my father's estate. They're all in the office safe. He's destroying the paper trail." "And us with it," Madeline said, already on her feet, grabbing her coat. "The digital copies are useless without the originals." We were out the door in seconds, sprinting to her car. Madeline punched 911 into her phone and put it on speaker, her voice cutting and clear as she drove. "I am reporting an arson in progress at the Harborview Tower. The suspect is Julian Thorne. He is violent, has made threats, and may be attempting to flee. Yes, send everyone." She disconnected and looked at me, and I meant what I said. "He may be armed." We tore up to the building. The penthouse was not just smoking, it was an inferno. Black, oily clouds poured from the broken windows, staining the night sky. The first sirens were screaming in the distance. "He won't use the front door," I said, pointing. "The dock. He's escaping by sea." We ran through the manicured lobby, ignoring the doorman, and burst out onto the private pier. The air was thick with the smell of burning chemicals and salt water, and there he was. A small, sleek sport boat was idling clumsily at the end of the dock. His sister, Olivia, a vapid woman I had only ever seen at parties, was fumbling with the controls, her face a mask of terror. Julian was on the dock, throwing duffel bags onto the deck. "Julian!" I shouted, my voice ripping through the night. "Stop!" He froze. He turned, slowly. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes wide and manic. When he saw me, he did not look defeated. He looked ecstatic. He laughed, a high-pitched, unhinged sound that echoed over the water. "Too late, Eliza." He screamed, and he held up the silver hard drive. This was his prize. It's too late I might lose the company. I might even lose my money. But I have this. I am going to send this to every news outlet in the world. I will show them your diaries. I will show the whole world exactly how crazy you really are. Olivia was crying, trying desperately to start the boat's engine, but in her panic, she had flooded it. It coughed and sputtered, refusing to catch. "Give it to me, Julian," I said, walking slowly toward him, my hands open. "Get away from me," he shrieked. He dropped the last bag. He saw his escape route was failing, and he looked at me, at the water, and back at me. He made his choice. He lunged. He was not trying to hit me. He was trying to tackle me, to throw me off the dock, into the freezing black water of the Boston Harbor. He was creating a diversion, a man overboard. Anything to get a few more seconds. The old Eliza would have frozen. The old Eliza would have been pushed. I was not the old Eliza. Reyes's training, the endless hours of Krav Maga, took over. I did not retreat. I met his charge. As his hands grabbed for my shoulders, I stepped into his center of gravity. I planted my foot, pivoted on my hip, and used his own manic forward momentum against him. It was not a fight. It was physics. Julian flew over my hip, his body not prepared for the sudden shift. He crashed, hard, onto the wooden planks of the dock, the air exploding from his lungs in a pained, shocked grunt. The silver hard drive flew from his grasp, tumbling end over end, and landed on the dock between us, glinting in the light of the fire high above. The wail of sirens was no longer distant. It was a deafening, overwhelming chorus coming from every direction. The harbor was suddenly illuminated as a Boston police cutter boat rounded the corner, its high-powered searchlight pinning Julian to the dock. On the street, multiple squad cars and a fire engine slammed to a halt. flooding the pier with a chaotic wash of red and blue. Julian did not move. He was still on his hands and knees, wheezing, a rat caught in a cage of flashing lights. Above us, the penthouse exploded. A window burst outward in a shower of glass and flame, a $20 million funeral pyre for the life he had tried to build. The fire lit up the entire waterfront. Out on the water, seeing the police boat approach, Olivia Thorne finally just gave up. She burst into hysterical tears and raised her hands high above her head, a portrait of pathetic surrender. I calmly bent down and closed my hand around the silver hard drive. I slid it into the pocket of my coat. I looked at Julian as he was frozen in the strobing lights, a pathetic creature covered in soot, his face a mask of disbelief. He was no longer a monster. He was just a small, failed man. "You said I would never recover," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the noise of the sirens. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "You were right," I continued, the words tasting like victory. "I did not recover. I evolved." The sound of boots thundered on the wooden dock. "Boston PD hands in the air. Get on the ground." Julian did not even have the strength to fight. He just knelt there, a broken thing, as two uniformed officers hauled him to his feet, twisted his arms behind his back, and cinched the handcuffs with a final metallic click. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for felony arson, reckless endangerment, and making terroristic threats," the officer said, reading him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent." He was already silent. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for what mercy forgiveness I gave him nothing. As they began to march him up the ramp toward the street, Madeline stepped forward, blocking his path. She held a single, folded sheet of paper. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice sharp and formal, ringing with finality. He stopped, confused. The officers paused, holding him. "The board of directors of Apex Innovative Solutions, including the majority shareholder, Vance Holdings, convened an emergency session this morning," Madeline announced, clear and precise. "It was a very productive meeting." She unfolded the paper and held it up for him to read, though his eyes were too dazed to focus. The first official act of the new chair, Mrs. Eliza Vance, was a unanimous vote. "You are terminated, for cause, effective immediately. All stock options, severance, and benefits are hereby forfeited." That was the blow that finally broke him. Not the handcuffs, not the fire, not the loss of his mistress. His eyes snapped into focus. His jaw dropped. He had lost the money. He had lost his freedom. But now, in this final moment, he understood he had also lost his title. He had been officially, legally, and humiliatingly fired from his own empire by me. "Take him away," Madeline said to the officers, dismissing him like an errand boy. They hauled him off. I watched him go, a ghost being led away from the living. I turned my back on the fire, the symbolic, cleansing inferno of my past. I turned my back on the man who was no longer my husband, no longer my partner, no longer anything. And I watched the first, clean, cold light of dawn begin to break over the Boston harbor. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.